What if Tony Stark didn't just visit the past in Avengers Endgame, but unknowingly planted the seed of something far more dangerous than Thanos ever was? I keep coming back to that quiet 1970s sequence because the more I watch it, the more it feels like a crack in reality. Not loud, not explosive, but subtle, emotional, and strangely loaded with consequences. I started connecting the dots, and what I found doesn't just change that scene, it reframes an entire future we haven't fully seen yet. One where Tony Stark might not be a hero at all. Instead, he becomes something darker, something colder, something far more dangerous. When I rewatch Avengers Endgame, I notice how the film carefully avoids calling that 1970s visit a closed loop. It presents it emotionally, not scientifically, which leaves room for interpretation. Tony and Steve don't just sneak in and out. They interact, they talk, they influence. And that matters, especially when Tony meets Howard Stark, because that conversation feels too meaningful to be consequence-free. I think that moment plants something deeper than closure, something that begins quietly rewriting how that timeline develops, nudging it just enough to create a different destiny, one where Tony's shadow lingers long after he leaves. The moment Tony speaks to his father, it feels intimate, almost therapeutic, but there's something unsettling underneath it. Tony isn't just a son anymore. He's a man from the future carrying knowledge, perspective, and emotional clarity that Howard never had access to. And even if Tony doesn't explicitly reveal the future, the way he talks, the way he frames ideas about legacy and protection, it inevitably leaves an imprint. I noticed how Howard reacts, how he absorbs those words, and it made me wonder, what if that single conversation accelerated everything? What if that was the moment Stark Industries began moving towards something more aggressive, more advanced, more controlled? Because here's the thing, in a universe like the MCU, small changes don't stay small. The entire logic of the multiverse, especially after Loki, tells us that even the slightest deviation can branch into something entirely new. So when Tony and Steve take the Tesseract and interact with people in 1970, I don't see a stable timeline anymore. I see a fracture, a branch reality forming in real time. And inside that branch, everything that comes after is no longer guaranteed to follow the same path we know. That includes Tony Stark himself, or at least a version of him. Now imagine this. In that branched timeline, Howard Stark is slightly different. He's more inspired, more driven, maybe even more paranoid about the future. His company grows faster, his ideas evolve earlier, and technology begins advancing at a pace we never saw in the original MCU timeline. I started thinking about what kind of world that creates. A world where Stark tech dominates earlier, where innovation outpaces ethics, and where power concentrates much faster. That kind of environment doesn't produce the same Tony Stark we know. It creates someone sharper, more calculated, and possibly more detached from humanity. And that's where the theory gets darker. Because Tony Stark isn't just defined by his intelligence, he's defined by his experiences. The cave in Afghanistan, the Avengers, the failures, the guilt, the sacrifice, all of these shaped him into a hero. But remove or alter those experiences and you don't get Iron Man, you get something else entirely. I think in this branched timeline, Tony either grows up differently or becomes a variant shaped by a more controlled, more technologically dominant world. And without those grounding moments of failure and redemption, his core belief doesn't soften, it hardens. That belief has always been there. Even in the original timeline, Tony constantly struggles with control. He builds suits of armor around the world. He creates Ultron. He believes that he alone can solve problems if he just thinks hard enough. The difference is, in our timeline, he learns restraint. He learns sacrifice. But in this alternate path, I don't think he ever gets that lesson. Instead, his mindset evolves unchecked. And when I followed that line of thinking, it led me somewhere chilling. It led me directly to the ideology of Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom isn't just a villain. He's a ruler who genuinely believes the world is safer under his control. And when I compare that to Tony's worst tendencies, the overlap is undeniable. Both are geniuses. Both are inventors. Both believe they can fix everything. The only difference is that Tony learns humility while Doom never does. So what if, in this branched timeline, Tony never learns it? What if his desire to protect the world transforms into a need to dominate it? That's not a completely different character. That's Tony Stark, just without redemption. Then I started thinking about the armor, because Iron Man's suits are symbols of heroism in the MCU we know, but they didn't start that way. They started as weapons. And in a world where Tony never evolves emotionally, those suits don't become symbols of hope. They become tools of control. I imagine a version of Tony who refines the armor not for defense, but for domination. Less flashy, more intimidating. Less about saving people, more about making sure they can't resist. That evolution doesn't feel like a stretch. It feels like a natural progression if his morality shifts even slightly. And this is where the multiverse concept makes everything click into place. The MCU has already shown us that variants can be wildly different while still being fundamentally the same person. Loki can be a hero, a villain, a trickster, or even something entirely unexpected. So why can't Tony Stark follow that same pattern? In one universe, he becomes Iron Man, the savior. In another, he becomes something else entirely. Not because he's a different person, but because his path diverged at a critical moment. And that moment, I think, is the 1970s timeline. What makes this theory so compelling to me is how tragic it is. Because it means that the greatest hero of one universe could become the greatest villain of another. It means that everything Tony sacrificed in our timeline is what prevented him from becoming Doom. And without those sacrifices, without that growth, he doesn't just fail to become a hero, he becomes the very thing he was trying to protect the world from. A tyrant, a ruler, a man who believes that freedom is too dangerous to exist without his control. I also can't ignore how cleanly this fits into future storytelling. Introducing Dr. Doom as a completely new character is one thing, but revealing him as a variant of Tony Stark? That adds emotional weight instantly. It turns every interaction into a reflection of what could have been. It makes the audience question whether Doom is truly evil or just a version of Tony who never got the chance to change. And that kind of layered storytelling is exactly what the MCU has been building toward with the multiverse saga. So when I go back and watch that 1970 scene now, I don't just see a heartfelt moment between a son and his father. I see the beginning of something much bigger, a branching timeline, a subtle shift, a version of Tony Stark being set on a completely different path, one where he doesn't learn to let go, one where he doesn't make the ultimate sacrifice, one where he decides that the only way to save the world is to rule it. And that to me feels like the perfect origin of Dr. Doom. And if that's true, then the scariest part isn't that Doom exists somewhere in the multiverse. It's that he was always possible. He was always inside Tony Stark, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. All it took was one small change, one conversation, one moment in time. That's what makes this theory so powerful. It doesn't just create a villain. It reveals that the line between hero and villain was always thinner than we thought. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. We all know the story. Tony Stark, The man who was Iron Man saved the universe. With a snap of his fingers, he made the ultimate sacrifice, leaving behind a legacy that pretty much defines the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. We mourned him, we built monuments to him, and we accepted his death as the perfect final chapter. But what if it wasn't the end? What if, in our rush to make him a saint, we missed some of the fine print on his legacy? What if the hero we lost is secretly responsible for the next great threat the world is going to face? What if that brilliant, chaotic mind that gave us the arc reactor also left behind a shadow? A final terrifying, unintended consequence that makes Ultron look like a practice run. This is the theory that challenges everything we thought we knew about the MCU's greatest hero. This is the story of how Tony Stark may have secretly, accidentally, and tragically created Dr. Doom. Okay, so before we get into the heart of this, we have to look at Tony's track record. Because to understand how he could possibly be connected to a villain as huge as Victor Von Doom, you have to remember who Tony was through his whole journey. A hero, absolutely, but also a guy haunted by his own inventions. His story is just a repeating cycle of brilliant ideas that create even more brilliant problems. It started from day one. The first Iron Man suit was built to escape a cave. But that same tech was immediately turned against him by his mentor, Obadiah Stane, who became Ironmonger. Tony literally created his own first villain. Then in Iron Man 2, his father's past came back to haunt him, giving us Whiplash, who was armed with a design he copied from Tony, flaunting his tech all over the world. Another villain, forged in the fires of the Stark legacy. And then you have the big one, Ultron. This wasn't some alien threat. This was a monster born directly from Tony's trauma after the Battle of New York. He wanted to put a suit of armor around the world, and his heart was in the right place, but he rushed it. He was so sure that he alone knew best, and he ended up creating a genocidal AI that almost destroyed the world. The destruction of Sokovia, the Sokovia Accords that ripped the Avengers apart, it all goes back to one moment of Stark's genius going unchecked. This is the pattern. Tony sees a problem, he secretly builds a solution, and that solution becomes the next even bigger problem. It's a loop of genius and ego, so when we ask, could Tony have created Dr. Doom? We're not just pulling a theory out of thin air. We're asking if the pattern repeated one last, final time. When you start digging into how this could happen, fans and theorists usually go down two main paths. Both are pretty compelling, both pull from the comics, and both would be a massive deal for the future of the MCU. The first idea is the main timeline creation theory. This is the most straightforward route. It suggests that something Tony did in the main MCU timeline we all watched is directly responsible for creating Victor Von Doom. This could be a forgotten rival, a victim of his collateral damage, or even someone who finds his old tech. In this version, Doom is a man from our world, a direct consequence of the age of Iron Man. The second path is way more mind-bending and fits right in with the multiverse saga. It's the multiversal variant theory. This one argues the connection isn't cause and effect, but identity. That Tony Stark and Victor Von Doom are basically variants of the same person. Two sides of the same coin, separated only by their life choices. This isn't just about Tony creating Doom, it's about Tony, in another life, being Doom. So, let's treat this like a proper investigation. We'll look at the evidence for both, starting with the one that's a little more grounded, before we dive into the madness of the multiverse. So let's start in our world, the main MCU timeline. How could the Tony Stark we know, the hero who died, be the reason for Marvel's most famous tyrant? There are a couple of theories that are chillingly believable. First, there's the idea of the unseen rival. Remember Tony's life before he was Iron Man? It was all weapons deals, big parties, and burning bridges. We saw it in Iron Man 3 with Aldrich killing a guy Tony blew off on a rooftop, who then spent a decade building a terror network just to get back at him. Who's to say Killian was the only one? Imagine a young Victor Von Doom at MIT, just as smart as Tony, but without the money or the famous last name. Maybe they worked on a project together, something went wrong, and Tony's father's lawyers cleaned it all up, leaving Victor ruined, disfigured, and blaming Stark for everything. For Tony, it was a Tuesday. For Victor, it was the day Dr. Doom was born. But what if it's more recent? What if the spark isn't some old grudge, but a global disaster? Let's talk about the Sokovia connection. This is one of the most popular and logical fan theories out there. Sokovia is a deep scar on the MCU, a reminder of Tony Stark's greatest failure, Ultron. Their home was destroyed, their families were torn apart, and their nation basically dissolved. That kind of place is fertile ground for a revolutionary, a man who promises to restore his nation's pride and power. This theory suggests Victor Von Doom is a Sokovian native who watched Stark's creation tear his country apart. He wouldn't see Iron Man as a savior. He'd see him as a symbol of reckless Western power. That one event is all the motivation he'd need. From the ashes of his home, Victor could rise, rally his people, and promise to build a new, better nation, Latveria. This theory is powerful because it doesn't need to rewrite history. It builds on events we've already seen, turning the tragedy of Age of Ultron into the origin story for the next big bad. And how would this new leader build his nation? He wouldn't have to start from scratch. He could use Stark's tech as the catalyst. We saw in Spider-Man Homecoming how much advanced tech was left lying around after Avengers-level events. The Sokovia disaster site would have been a goldmine of Ultron parts and Chitauri tech. A genius like Victor Von Doom could take Ultron's flawed code and perfect it for his Doombots. He could take Stark's legacy and literally build his empire from its scraps. Doom's armor wouldn't just rival Iron Man's, it would be its dark evolution. Alright, now we're headed into the deep end. The multiverse saga has shown us that identity is fluid, which opens the door to the wild possibility that our Tony Stark and the coming Dr. Doom are in a way the same person. They're reflections of each other, genius-level intellect, huge egos, and a belief that they alone can fix the world with a suit of armor. The line between them is razor thin. So, what if in another universe, Tony's life went just a little bit differently, and he was led down a path of tyranny instead of heroism? This is the core of the variant theory. While there's no mainstream comic where Tony is Dr. Doom, Marvel has explored the connection in body swap stories and what if comics for years, showing just how intertwined they are. This brings us to the biggest piece of evidence. The confirmed casting that Robert Downey Jr. will return to play Dr. Doom. At first it sounds like stunt casting, but what if it's the entire point? What if the only person who can play this Doom is RDJ, because this Doom is a version of Tony Stark? While Downey Jr. has publicly shot down the idea that he's playing a Stark variant, and reports suggest Marvel might just keep Doom's face hidden, the casting alone is impossible to ignore. Some of the theories about how this could work get really wild, like the idea of dreamwalking and possession. We saw in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness that powerful magic users can project their minds into their variants across universes. Dr. Doom is a master of science and sorcery. What if, with the multiverse now open, the consciousness of a prime Dr. Doom found the perfect vessel? A freshly dead genius, a hero mourned by the world whose face people trust. This is of course just an unconfirmed fan theory, but it would be a terrifying way to twist Tony's legacy by having a monster wear his face. The variant theory is complicated and a little heartbreaking. It suggests the hero we loved was either a pawn in a bigger game, or that his image is now being used by the next great evil. But it does give a perfect in-universe reason for us to see the face of a friend as the soul of a monster. Whether you lean towards the creator theory or the variant theory, it all points to the same place: the rise of a man who is the dark mirror of Tony Stark. The biggest connection is the duality of genius. Both Tony and Victor are brilliant men with a deep-seated belief that they have to save the world from itself. Tony's way was a suit of armor around the world. Doom's philosophy is peace through absolute control. They're two sides of the same authoritarian coin. Tony's just came with better marketing. On top of that, Tony's death created a massive power vacuum. Who else on Earth has his level of genius, resources, and influence? The world is missing its futurist protector. This is the perfect environment for a new player to step onto the stage, offering the world order in a time of chaos. Dr. Doom's rise isn't just possible in a world without Tony Stark, it feels almost necessary. We've even seen a version of this in the comics. In the infamous Iron Man storyline, Victor Von Doom actually tries to become a hero by taking up the Iron Man mantle after Tony is put in a coma. The MCU could be setting up a dark flip of that idea, a Doom who doesn't want to be the new Iron Man, but wants to prove he's the superior one, claiming Tony's methods were weak and his sacrifice was a failure. Now, any good theory has to hold up to a few tough questions. The most obvious one is, doesn't this cheapen Tony's journey? If his body is possessed or he was a variant all along, does it undo his sacrifice? It's a fair question, but you could also argue it makes his story even more tragic. If he's possessed after death, it means even in death he can't rest, and his image is being twisted by the very thing he died to stop. It doesn't erase his heroism, it frames it in cosmic horror. The other big question is, if Doom is so powerful, where has he been this whole time? If he was a rival or a Sokovian, why are we just now hearing from him? The answer could be time. Building a nation and mastering science and magic doesn't happen overnight. While the Avengers were fighting Thanos, Doom could have been quietly building his power base in Latveria, hidden from the world. The chaos after the blip would be the perfect time to reveal himself. Or, if he's a multiversal being, the answer is even easier. He couldn't get here until Sylvie broke the sacred timeline in Loki. He wasn't hiding, he was waiting. This is one of the biggest theories in the MCU right now, and it really makes you rethink Tony Stark's entire story. But now I want to know what you think. Do you believe Tony somehow created Doom in the main timeline, or do you buy the multiverse variant idea? More importantly, which one would be more exciting to see on screen? Let me know your theories down in the comments below. And if you like breaking down these MCU mysteries, make sure to like and subscribe for more. When you lay out all the pieces, the link between Tony Stark and Dr. Doom feels less like a random fan theory and more like something the MCU has been building towards. The directors of the next Avengers movie have even confirmed there will be a connection between Iron Man's death and Dr. Doom's debut, though the exact nature of it remains a secret. For years, we've wondered how the MCU could ever top a threat like Thanos. You can't just find another giant alien who wants to collect space stones. You raise the stakes by making it personal. You create a villain who isn't just a physical threat, but an emotional and philosophical one. A villain who, in some twisted way, wears the face of a friend. Tony Stark started all of this with the words, "I am Iron Man." It would be a dark, poetic, and tragic way to bookend his legacy if the next saga is defined by a villain who can stand before the Avengers and say the exact same thing, twisting a legacy of hope into a promise of doom. Should Doom be a dark reflection of Tony Stark or a completely separate threat with his own story? Let's find out. Alright, let's start with the elephant in the room. Robert Downey Jr. is back in the MCU, but not as Iron Man. He's playing Dr. Doom, one of Marvel's most iconic villains. When this news dropped, the internet lost its mind. Some fans cheered, hyped to see RDJ return in any form. Others? Not so much. They're worried Marvel's leaning too hard into nostalgia, risking the integrity of a character as complex as Victor Von Doom. So why the divide? RDJ's Tony Stark was the heart of the MCU for over a decade. His charm, wit, and genius made Iron Man a fan favorite. Casting him as Doom feels like a bold move, but it's also a gamble. Fans are asking, is this a clever way to explore the multiverse, or is Marvel just banking on RDJ's star power to sell tickets? The debate boils down to two big theories. Is Doom a Tony Stark variant, or is he the classic Victor Von Doom from the comics? Let's dig into both sides. First up, the idea that RDJ's Doom is a Tony Stark variant from another universe. This theory's got legs because the MCU's multiverse is wide open. We've seen variants galore in Loki, Spider-Man, No Way Home, and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. A variant is basically an alternate version of a character, shaped by different choices or events. So could RDJ's Doom be a Tony Stark who went down a darker path? Think about it, Tony Stark's a genius inventor with a massive ego and a knack for bending the rules. Sounds a little like Victor Von Doom, right? In the comics, Doom's a brilliant scientist, driven by pride and a hunger for power. What if, in some universe, Tony's arrogance takes him past the point of no return? Instead of becoming Iron Man, he becomes a tyrant, maybe ruling a world with an iron fist, pun intended. This dark Tony could wear a suit of armor, wield advanced tech, and even rock a scarred face under a mask. Sound familiar? The multiverse makes this possible. In What If? We've seen Tony Stark in wild scenarios, like becoming a zombie or failing to stop Thanos. A Doom variant could be the ultimate what-if story. What if Tony Stark's genius turned him into a villain? This theory's juicy because it lets RDJ play a character we already love, but with a sinister twist. It's meta, it's emotional, and it could set up an epic showdown with other Avengers like Doctor Strange or Kang. But here's the catch. Would this feel too much like fan service? If Doom's just a bad Tony, does it cheapen the character of Victor Von Doom? Let's explore the other side. Now let's talk about the purists' take. RDJ's Doom should be Victor Von Doom, period. No Stark connection, no multiverse shenanigans, just the classic comic book villain in all his glory. In the comics, Doom is a unique character with a rich backstory. He's a Romani genius from Latveria, scarred by a lab accident, obsessed with power, and convinced he's humanity's savior. He's not just a bad guy Tony Stark, he's a one-of-a-kind threat with his own motivations. Fans who want this version argue that tying Doom to Tony Stark robs him of his depth. Victor Von Doom isn't just a mirror of Iron Man, he's a foil to multiple heroes, like Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. In the comics, Doom's rivalry with Reed is legendary, two brilliant minds clashing over ego and ideology. If Marvel makes Doom a Stark variant, it could shift the focus away from that dynamic, especially since the Fantastic Four are finally joining the MCU. Plus, Doom's comic roots are sacred to many fans. His Latverian heritage, his mysticism, his godlike ambition, these make him stand out in a sea of villains. Casting RDJ could still work here. His charisma and gravitas could bring Doom to life without any Stark baggage. Imagine RDJ delivering Doom's iconic monologues, commanding the screen in that green cloak and metal mask. It could be a fresh take, proving RDJ's range beyond Tony Stark. But here's the flip side. Would audiences buy RDJ as someone totally disconnected from Tony? His mannerisms, voice, and charm are so tied to Stark that it might feel like a stretch. Could Marvel pull it off without confusing casual fans? Okay, let's get a little wild. What if Marvel's playing a metagame, deliberately blurring the lines between Tony Stark and Victor Von Doom? This is where things get fun. The MCU loves its mind-bending twists, and RDJ's casting could be a way to mess with our expectations. Picture this. Avengers Doomsday opens with RDJ as a character who seems like Tony Stark. But something's off. Maybe he's colder, crueler, or obsessed with control. The audience is left guessing, is this Tony? Is this Doom? Is it both? This approach would lean into the multiverse's chaos. Maybe RDJ's Doom is a hybrid, a Tony Stark variant who's taken on traits of Victor Von Doom, like his armor or mysticism. Or maybe he's Doom pretending to be Tony to manipulate the Avengers. The possibilities are endless, and Marvel could use this to explore themes of identity, legacy, and morality. What makes a hero? What makes a villain? RDJ's casting could be the perfect vehicle to ask those questions. This meta angle also fits Marvel's track record. They love callbacks and Easter eggs. RDJ as Doom could nod to Tony's darker moments, like creating Ultron or clashing with Captain America in Civil War. It's a way to honor Tony's legacy while introducing a new threat. But it's risky. Lean too hard into the meta, and it might feel gimmicky. Fans might roll their eyes if it's just a nostalgia grab. To figure out which theory holds up, let's look at the comics. Victor Von Doom is one of Marvel's oldest and most complex villains, debuting in Fantastic Four #5 in 1962. He's a scientist, a sorcerer, and a dictator, ruling Latveria with an iron will. His rivalry with Reed Richards stems from their college days, where a lab accident left Doom scarred and bitter. He blames Reed, but his own arrogance is the real culprit. Doom's not just evil for evil's sake. He believes he's the only one who can save the world, even if it means conquering it. Tony Stark, meanwhile, shares some traits with Doom: genius intellect, high-tech armor, and a massive ego. In crossover stories like Iron Man Dr. Doom, Doom Quest, they've clashed, highlighting their similarities and differences. But they're distinct characters. Tony's driven by redemption and heroism. Doom's driven by control and superiority. There's even a comic where Doom swaps bodies with Tony, showing how close yet far apart they are. The comics also give us multiverse precedent. In Exiles and other stories, we've seen alternate versions of heroes and villains. A Tony Stark who becomes Doom isn't canon, but it's not impossible. Marvel could draw from these ideas to craft a unique MCU story, blending comic accuracy with multiverse creativity. The fandom split and X is buzzing with takes. Some fans love the idea of a Tony Stark variant. One post called it the ultimate multiverse flex, RDJ as a villain. Tony would break the internet. Others argue it's lazy casting, with one user saying, Doom deserves to be his own character, not a Stark clone. Give us Latveria, not Stark Tower 2.0. The debate's heated, with polls showing about 60% of fans want a standalone Doom, while 40% are down for a Dark Tony. Casual fans seem more open to the variant idea, drawn to RDJ's return. Hardcore comic fans, though, are protective of Doom's legacy. They want his Romani roots and Fantastic Four ties respected. This split shows Marvel's walking a tightrope. Appeal to the masses, but don't alienate the diehards. So why does this debate even matter? Because Dr. Doom is a big deal. He's not just another villain, he's a game changer who could shape the MCU's next phase. If Doom's a Tony Stark variant, it ties into the multiverse saga, setting up conflicts with Kang, Loki, or even Deadpool's crew. It could also explore Tony's legacy, showing how his choices ripple across universes. But if Doom's a standalone character, it opens the door for the Fantastic Four to shine. The MCU's Fantastic Four movie is coming, and Doom's their arch enemy. A faithful Victor Von Doom could anchor a new corner of the MCU with Latveria as a geopolitical hotspot. It would also show Marvel's willing to take risks, not just lean on familiar faces. Either way, RDJ's casting is a statement. It's Marvel saying, we're not done surprising you. But they've got to stick the landing. A misstep could make Avengers Doomsday feel like a cash grab, while a bold choice could redefine the MCU. What do we actually know? Marvel's been tight-lipped, but we've got clues. The Avengers Doomsday title suggests Doom's the central threat, not a side character. Kevin Feige has said RDJ was cast for his unique ability to embody complex characters, hinting at a nuanced Doom. No mention of Tony Stark, though, which keeps both theories alive. Set photos and leaks are scarce, but rumors suggest RDJ's Doom will have a mask and armor, leaning into the comic aesthetic. The Fantastic Four's involvement in Doomsday points to a Reed Richards connection, supporting the standalone Doom theory. But the multiverse is the MCU's playground, so a variant twist isn't off the table. Here's my take. Marvel should blend both ideas. Make RDJ's Doom a standalone Victor Von Doom, true to his comic roots, with Latveria, mysticism, and all. But sprinkle in subtle nods to Tony Stark. Maybe a shared mannerism or a line that echoes Iron Man. This keeps Doom distinct while using RDJ's casting to add layers. It's not about making Doom a Stark clone. It's about exploring parallels between two brilliant, flawed men. This approach honors the comics, respects fans, and plays to RDJ's strengths. It also sets up future stories like Doom versus Reed, or even a multiverse clash with another Tony Stark. Marvel's got a chance to make something iconic. Let's hope they don't play it too safe. So where do you stand? Is RDJ's Dr. Doom a Tony Stark variant twisted by the multiverse into a villain? Or is he Victor Von Doom, the Latverian tyrant we've loved to hate for decades? Maybe Marvel's cooking up something in between, a meta masterpiece that'll keep us guessing. One thing's for sure, this casting is a game changer, and Avengers Doomsday is going to be a wild ride.